Everyday Samurai, Episode 35. Greetings, friends, and welcome to Everyday Samurai, in service to your liberty and the security of a free state. How do you do? Very glad to have you on board for this very special episode of Everyday Samurai, because I get to share with you a conversation with James Williams Sensei of Nami Aiki Heiho. James Williams is someone I have long thought of as a model and mentor in my own approach to samurai-related martial arts. His system of teaching begins with the nature of edged weapons combat, and builds an entire corpus of technique, tactics, and strategy with this underlying truth. In this way, Williams Sensei offers a comprehensive operating system that is scalable to individual, team, and even nationwide application. Another reason that I consider him a model and mentor is his entrepreneurial spirit. He trained and operated a dojo, taught internationally and among top-tiered law enforcement and military units, all while managing several businesses. Yes, he served in the military earlier in life, as you'll hear during our conversation, yet like a true warrior in service to liberty, he made his way in the world by offering value to others in the free market and prospered through voluntary trade, not dependent upon the tax dole. This is why you can find him at blade and shot shows, demonstrating the cutting ability of the swords he sells at Brigade.com, his website for all things samurai, or the modern tactical knives he makes based on classic Japanese tanto at WilliamsBladeDesign.com, as well as his online training offered at SystemOfStrategy.com. Of course, there will be links in the show notes page, so please check out everydaysamurai.life/35 for the details. Taking the entrepreneurial path requires dealing with risk, uncertainty, and fear. Overcoming these natural human impulses, which keep us trapped in destructive patterns, is at the heart of Williams Sensei's training methodology. You'll hear more about this during our conversation, and even learn how facing the razor's edge empowers skillful aging, since Williams Sensei has now entered his 70s, and he has better posture and movement than decades ago. He describes how his training, again focused solely on prevailing in edged weapons combat, helps shine the light of consciousness on the fears hidden within that actually manifest as immobility, poor posture, and dysfunction. So, while Williams Sensei puts martial arts squarely within the realm of war, which he describes as breaking things and killing people, and being able to do so without having your opponent doing so to you, the ultimate purpose of this training is about personal empowerment, expanding the range of choices available to the individual, who in turn then has the capacity to make larger contributions to their loved ones and community. For this reason, Williams Sensei is big on connection. He's very engaging, enjoys talking, getting to know people, conveying meaningful stories, and laying hands on people. His intuitive faculties are highly developed and can tell a great deal about someone just from a handshake. This comes about from decades of training, and again, this training ultimately yields personal empowerment and connection. One of the best things you can do to develop your faculties and make personal and interpersonal connections is by studying a foreign language. Studying a foreign language keeps the mind sharp by challenging it to assimilate new information. It builds synaptic pathways within the nervous system that cross over the brain hemispheres in ways that yield benefits to other areas in life. Again, this allows for skillful aging and helps get you out of comfort zones, complacency, or stagnation. Language learning is also something you can do while on the road, on the daily commute, or while exercising, if you have the right tools. And that is exactly what Rocket Languages provides. With interactive audio, a free mobile app for the smartphone, culture lessons, and lots of positive reinforcement, Rocket Languages is the easiest and best way to enjoy being a lifetime learner. Get a free trial of the language of your choice. Of course, I'm partial to Japanese, but you can choose whatever language and culture you want to connect with when you go to everydaysamurai.life/rocket. That's everydaysamurai.life/rocket. Get your free trial today. Okay, I now present to you a conversation with James Williams Sensei. James Williams Sensei, welcome to Everyday Samurai, in service to liberty and the security of a free state. So glad to have you with us.
Great to talk to you. Been a little bit, but happy to be on this program.
Yeah, and very glad that you are joining us from your new Hombu Dojo location in Bozeman, Montana. We'll get into that in a few minutes. But people listening to this program have probably become familiar with your work because I actually read one of your articles, The Virtue of the Sword. I found it so transformative and inspiring. So getting into the samurai traditions was a bit of a transformation in your own life. So how did you go from being a boxer and a kickboxer into somebody established in the samurai-related arts?
That's an interesting story for sure. So I had a need to learn how to fight. I went to Catholic school with the Irish in the 50s. I was actually a small kid with thick glasses. I couldn't see your face. You couldn't see your eyes from 5 feet away if my glasses got knocked off, right? So I really wanted to get more competent. And people see me now and I'm, 6'2", 215 pounds. And they're like, well, you're a big guy. But through high school, my sister's 2 years younger, was taller than me through most of high school. I didn't grow until later in life, so I didn't grow up with that feeling of being competent. So, I wanted to wrestle and I wanted to do whatever I could to learn how to be more competent. And so I studied martial arts whenever I could as I got older, even when I was in the military. In mid-70s, I went up to Santa Rosa, California, and I was looking for a place to train, and I walked around the back, and I'm looking in, and I'm watching this guy hit a bag, and I said, man, this guy's really smooth and fluid. I just finished being one of instructors for Pyugyuan and Taekwondo. Really different, really smooth. So I decided I was going to start studying there, which ended up really having a massive impact on me. My teacher, Frank Scalercio Jr., who, by the way, just died in August. I haven't been a chance to put something up yet because of the dojo and everything, but Frank was the best martial artist that people have never heard of, in my opinion. Frank died at 81. Frank was 10 years older than me. So, and just so innovative. His kick punch combinations are still better than I see in MMA. They're getting closer. And Frank was an innovator in so many ways. Frank was the kind of guy that if he saw Bobo Olsen, former middleweight champion of the world, putting on a boxing exhibition and wanted to know anybody wanted to come in and box with him, Frank was like, man, I'm a fifth-degree black belt in Tang Soo Do. He'd lived in Korea for 8 years when he was in the military, and his wife was Korean. So Frank will jump in, and Bobo knocks it down. And Frank's like, man, I need to learn how this guy's doing this. So our footwork and our punching combinations came from boxing, put into kickboxing, nice and smooth, and combinations, between legs and feet are still, like I say, the best. They weren't separated like you see so many people or left on the table. And Frank himself was a heck of a fighter. I ended up working there because there was a drought in California in the 70s. And so landscaping business went away. And so I started working at the Institute. So I was literally there 6, sometimes 7 days a week, and very often most of the day, training, teaching, fighting, dojo fights, ring fights. Frank got me a job coaching wrestling. His youngest son, Michael, was at a junior high school, and they hadn't had a victory in 2.5 years. And so,
did you have a background in wrestling?
Yes. I'd wrestle. When I got out of the military, I had a couple years of junior college wrestling and summer stuff, and part of all that. So I took them. I didn't get to start the beginning of the year, but I literally became the head coach. The former guy had everybody should get an opportunity type of thing. They didn't have a winning attitude. They had this participation type of thing instead of trying to really bring the best out of people. And so the school, Herbert Slater, they were doormats and they knew it, and they walked in, they knew they were going to get clean. So by the end of the year, we'd won half of our matches. And when we walked in, their heads were up and they knew, hey, and everybody worked for everything. Nobody put their butt down on my wrestling mat. I wrestled every second with every wrestler. And then the next year, he got me to help assistant coach at Montgomery High School, where his oldest son, Frankie, was wrestling. And I just actually saw both of them at the funeral I hadn't seen them since they were teenagers. And now they're grown men, families, and grandkids for, it's 40 years. But it was still, great. I drove all the way to Santa Rosa, and Big Dave, my best friend who I met there, came down and, had to pay my respects to Frank. And I'd talked with Frank over the years, and I could not talk to Frank for 10 years and call him on the phone. And it was like last week. And he was just such a self-effacing guy with all of this. I'd say, Frank, thanks for teaching me how to fight. He said, well, you know how to fight before you came to me. I said, yeah, but you taught me how to win every time. And he was just, and one of the reasons people haven't heard about him is he was also a psychologist, doctor of psychology, and had a tremendous ability to work with the people that nobody else could work with, incorrigible delinquents, juvenile delinquents, stuff like that. So really, a guy that, again, people don't know about, but it was just a tremendous person, but a tremendous martial artist.
Well, now might be a good time to mention, for those that don't know, that you actually provide an online training forum using the technology of Vimeo and being able to have a subscription to access your videos. And one of the videos that you recently produced was you working the bag and showing some of the strategy involved in being able to throw strikes and also cover your vital areas using movement, etc.
J-Ro and I were watching fight fight last night between two really champion from Ghana, Comey, and an up and coming kid, young man. He's 22. When you get to be when I say kid, it's not not denigrating anybody. It's just when you're 22 years old, that's, the youngster caught the champion coming in with the right hand. The stuff I teach on the bag, I look at people hitting these big, heavy bags and standing statically. And I'm watching pop, 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 pop. They're not moving their head when they punch. They're not moving their feet. The bag's not moving enough. A lot of people, you need to hold the bag, da-da-da. And I'm like, no, I want that bag moving all the time and me moving all of the time. And when I punch, you've got to teach yourself on the bag because you're always programming. As you punch, you slip behind cover. You know how it is. I mean, it's infantry tactics 101, fire and maneuver, right? We don't move unless we've got cover fire. And then we provide it for somebody else, right? And so if I'm going to throw a punch, I need to slide behind the other hand when I'm doing that. And I do it on the bag. And I move when I punch, I move right after I punch. The bag's coming in, so I'm timing it. I'm slipping this way, sliding that way, bumping. And all of those things you need when you're fighting. So I don't look at bag work as an exercise in just working out. I look at it as I'm programming all the time. And I see people get caught with this, professionals get caught not doing some of those fundamental things. And I bring that because even though my prime directive is very high level samurai, and we use words that a lot of other people use, but we're doing it in a different way. You can't see it on video in that sense of the term.
Which is why your explanation is so important.
Yes, it's really critical because, it takes a long time to do this. When people say, how do I get to be like this? Well, I started young. I had to fight. I wasn't very good at it, but I had to fight. So I knew I needed to do that. I've got a huge grappling base. I rolled around with the Gracies in their garage in the late 80s when nobody knew they were. I mean, Horion, Hoyce, and Hickson were all living in the house on Red Beam and Torrance. Horion was still married to Suzanne. Hidon and my son Christopher, like 6, they go play in the backyard. My brother-in-law was one of the Dirty Dozen. So I've been around grappling, and it's the root of the tree. And so you build a foundation. So I started my kids all grappled. My grandkids are grappling. Now, is that something that you want to, have on the street? No, but you're building a base. You're building the root of the tree. Well, it's important to have a root, right? Root system. Not a good root system, plant's not going to go. Then you build a trunk and you build limbs and eventually leaves. Okay. At this point in my life, at my highest level, what I'm doing is the fruit. But it's built on a very solid foundation with a huge amount of experience in Chinese arts, Korean arts, Japanese arts, Filipino arts, Western arts, Russian arts.
And you're saying that the samurai-related arts are the highest level, the pinnacle in terms of practical efficacy.
The highest level of that, because we think that because it's Koryu that they all had, and they say the same words, but when you watch, you're not seeing the same things all the time. And you're getting instructors that may not have a lot of practical experience. And I'm not knocking any of it in that sense of the term. You just have to be careful with words because people use words like Aiki. Well, what they mean by, some people mean by that word and what we mean by the word is not the same thing. People talk soft. Well, what do you mean by soft, right? You saw the video I did in Germany, in Cologne, and we have a student teaching there, Anna Jacobson, who's really an excellent lady. I'm working with a bunch of people, a lot of them are Aikidoka, and when they do things like Nikkyo, which we call Nikkajo, which is, as you know, just a pre-World War II kind of Japanese, more archaic Japanese, it means the same thing, second technique. They use their bicep, and they try to, by scooping and stepping. Well, the problem is if you're with a hand grab person, wrestling, modern judo is a hand grab game, and all of that, you're not going to be able to get them like that because you're using strength and trying to lever it. And so what I did was I took a book and I said, well, where did this come from, right? Because a long time ago, empty hand to empty hand were just sports. Nobody thought of protecting themselves empty hand to empty hand, right? Everybody carried tools. In a society where you have some of the best blades that human beings have ever made, tough and strong and all that, doesn't come into play when the sword hits you, right? As you know, it's like a combat zone. The only thing that's good for people in a combat zone or healthy is to get out of it. So surviving something like that, and people forget as well, sharp weapons don't have a lot of shocking power in most of the stuff they cut. You can have a massive catastrophic wound like a kesagiri through the clavicle, etc. And the person you just opened up is not dead yet. And yet you're 2, 3, 4, 5 feet away from them. If they stick or cut you, the chances that you die too, Ayuchi, were really common. common. So, we don't block swords. We don't block punches. It's our whole mentality, the Otonashi no Kachi, silent victory. What I wanted to do there to help people understand, have somebody grab my wrist. Well, why would you grab a wrist? You grab a wrist because it's got a weapon in it. You want to control the weapon, the sword. So I took a bokken, grabbed my wrist. Then you have another tool. Like if you're watching prison shanks, they like to grab and just start punching holes in people. If you're, caught in the moment, you don't know how to do something, well, you're getting holes punched in you immediately. You don't have time.
Yeah, the sewing machine technique.
Yeah, you don't have time. So, I gave them, okay, you've got a botanto. I've got the sword. You grab my hand, opposite. I learned that in third grade. You have a guy grab you from one, pull you across, and anyway.
Well, no. That's a good point. The cross hand grab is more prevalent in a realistic situation than a same side grab.
Same side grab that's an easy solution. Cross hand grab, I literally learned it in third grade. I had my gray parka. I'm walking to school. This Irish kid who had older brothers, so he was eventually going to be the toughest one because all his brothers picked on him. And he grabbed me by one sleeve and pulled me so I couldn't use the hand closest to him, and I couldn't reach him with the other hand. And he's whacking away on me, and it was my on-the-job training for flanking, which, as you know, is fundamental to conflict. You don't want back and forth 50-50 gunfights. So again, infantry tactics 101 as far back as you can go. If you can, is you want to flank, right? So an opposite hand grab allows somebody to get an advantage potentially on you. And same in wrestling, right? To get an advantage on you. So, you're grabbing and you're keeping me from using my sword in the moment. You're punching holes in me. And if I flex or any tension at all in my arm, you can control me long enough to put holes in me. The fact that I might be able to do a technique by stepping and moving doesn't mean I didn't get stabbed. And that's the reality. That's what makes the old stuff. If you do it properly and you keep combat in mind and sharp edge tools in mind, makes it so effective. So literally there, and you can't see it, I'm doing nothing with my right arm. It's like grabbing something that's not connected to anything. The only thing I have to do is put the sword in place. So you can move my arm around. It doesn't matter. I can put the sword in place in a fraction of a second because there's no tension when you grab me. You're not connected to my center. You're not connected to my sword when you grab the arm. Any tension, including tension to hold the arm up in the air, allows your opponent to use that against you. My teaching, it's like you need to get yourself out of the way.
You just triggered two things that came to mind just now, in the sense that Stephen Covey from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the first principle is to begin with the end in mind. So rather than thinking, how am I going to reduce this problem or what have you, you begin with the end in mind, and that is cut the enemy down, which is what Miyamoto Musashi said. It doesn't matter whether you take the right stance, the left stance, the high guard or the low guard. What matters in combat is that you cut the enemy down.
And I think what people are forgetting with systems, and Kuro Sensei says this very well. He says people are misunderstanding kata. Kata is not about real fighting. Real fighting changes endlessly. Kata takes you into a different world. What we're doing with kata, it's not that they are not effective techniques, because we pick the most effective we can. However, the art is not the techniques. We want to understand the principles of the cosmos. And for me, manifest will of creator. There's a pattern here. There's a code, so to speak. There's information, and it's consistent. As Albert Einstein said, God does not play at dice. If I can have a methodology that teaches me how all of this works, and it can become so ingrained in me that the movement that needs to be done in the moment, I may never have done before, and I may never do again. And it's not a conscious mind thing. As you know, I work with the highest level of our special operations guys, and they'll say, sir, if you're thinking in the moment, you're dead. The mushin, the munin, the mizu no kokoro, all of those things they're not words. They're things you program in. With no reaction, your time to solution is really quick. And we look at all of this solution. These are solutions. I'm looking at solutions. When I teach guys that are going to go down range and their job is to hunt men, we're just solving problems. We're not interested in fighting. Fighting is inefficient at every level. We're just problem solving. Well, in the universe, every problem has inherent in the problem the solution. The more clearly I can see the problem, the more apparent the solution comes. If I bring aggression, which is fear-based, if I bring, we're this, we do this technique, or if I bring any of that, I've limited myself enormously. the fear go in the moment. I want to be Mizuno Kokoro. I want to be like still water. I want to be like a mirror.
Two things. Yeah, Mizuno Kokoro, the heart mind as water that can reflect anything that comes its way. And then the second thing was just to give everyone listening the proper foundation. You're talking about Kuroda Tetsuzan Sensei from Saitama, Japan, that you've been training with a number of years and who has his own comprehensive system of samurai tradition based on his family lineage.
20 years now.
Tremendous martial artist.
Kuroda Sensei evidences the best and highest level of the old movement. You know, the disappearing. He'll say, make disappear. I can see. And when I say that like he does, I'm not making fun. His English is very direct and easy to understand. He just leaves out all the fluff that gets in the way. But he's come up so far because when I first met him a long time ago, his English was very limited. But his English is way better than my Japanese. And he's an excellent person and teacher. And his son is also really becoming a good teacher and a good practitioner. Very happy to see that. He's an excellent young man as well.
How old is young man?
Early 30s, I think.
Outstanding.
So let's go back one thing real bit. So you asked me again how I got into this. So I'd studied some Aikido before I went up to fight and train in Santa Rosa, which I didn't realize that's what I was going to end up doing for a living, with a man, BJ Carlisle Sensei. And he is, above our Kamiza. It's not that I trained with him so much, but the first concept of Aiki and all of that came from BJ Sensei, who had been a World War II combat, Marine Pacific campaign, badly wounded on Guadalcanal. Very interesting gentleman. So what happened through the few years at the Institute for Better Health with Frank Scalercio, I fought a lot. It was great. Worked with Bobo Olsen, former middleweight champ of the world. So that's where our boxing and everything came. And Frank integrated that so well. And I'd basically not been beaten. I'd won every fight. I stopped everybody. And we traveled to Australia for a fight. And I have a picture of me. I'm in the ring in Australia, 10 o'clock at night, ready for a fight. Vaseline on my face. You can see it shiny and everything, ready to go.
There are photos of that, right? You have them out there somewhere?
Yeah. And the guy didn't get in the ring. And it was a bit of and this isn't, by the way, typical of Aussies. Aussies are a scrappy lot. This guy ended up being an anomaly. I ended up not getting a fight, which of all that energy and all that hard work, there was a guy, I can't remember his name, called the Red Dragon, who'd come to pose and hadn't brought anybody up from Adelaide. I bounced him off the fence a bit till Big Dave grabbed me. I was really, really upset, right? He'd come to pose. Why didn't you come to fight? Why didn't you bring people? Anyway. So it was a huge disappointment. Now, the upside of the huge disappointment is I realized I'd really run my course with that. It was a very tough school. There were Hell's Angels. There was a lot of really hard guys in this because, again, Frank worked with a lot of people. Now these people were a lot of guys that had been in the joint most of their life. I climbed my way to the top of that food chain, and it was like
interesting that they name it the Institute for Better Health, though, with that kind of clientele.
Well, Frank was a psychologist as well, and Frank had a gift. We used to work with incorrigible juvenile delinquents. I remember this one time working with this big Irish kid, and he was big. He's bigger than me, and I'm not a small guy. We'd spar with him, and he started coming after me. He was had an attitude. I tuned him up pretty good, right? I remember working with this young black kid, and with him, I handled it completely differently. He'd been beat on most of his life. This was not going to help him. The Irish kid needed to be taken down a few notches. This kid didn't need that. And so I worked with him a completely different way. And I got to look into it. And I'm thinking, this is a really good kid, but he's been so damaged. I don't know if but Frank was the guy that could work with these guys. So that was why Institute for Better Health. That was really Frank's biggest mission in life, was that, working with people like that. And he used the martial arts and stuff to do it. That was the deal. So we had, like I say, we had some different people in there, but I'd finally I don't even like a lot of these guys. This is not for me. I went back down to San Diego and I went back to see BJ. I was such a competent fighter. That stuff was just not effective for someone like me. So BJ Sensei, one class, frustrated with me. We stayed friends through his whole life. We belong with them. And he pointed to this gentleman who would come work out in the back of the room in a white hakama, doing different stuff just by himself. And that was John Klodig Sensei, who was a student of Danan J Sensei, who I started training with. And then a couple years later, I started going up to train with Anjay Sensei in Yanagi-do. 2-hour drive up to Los Angeles, 2 hours there, get home at midnight, get back. I had a business and a family. But that started me in the samurai arts, where I recognized, okay, well, all of this can come together.
Give us a background on Yanagi-ryu.
Yeah, so Yanagi-ryu, Anjay Sensei learned from Yoshida Kenji Sensei, who was the son of Yoshida Kotaro. So Yoshida Kotaro is well known in Japan by anybody in Koryu. Yoshida Kotaro was the one who introduced Ueshiba Morihei to Takeda Sokaku and vouched for his character. The mon that Ueshiba Morihei used is the Yanagi-ryu mon, which which was licensed to him by Yoshito Kotaro. They both worked for a magazine or a newspaper at the time. And Takamura Sensei would write about how what his grandfather thought about Yoshito Kotaro. And he said he used to hide under his bed when Yoshito Kotaro was come because he had so much energy. And Anjay Sensei had served in Korean War, small kid growing up.
And he was a police officer as well.
He was a police officer for a long time. And then because of some of the stuff took with narcotics and threats, he ended up becoming a makeup artist in Hollywood. So, but yeah, he was a police officer for quite some time as well. Did a lot of undercover work.
Oh, okay.
And got a lot of opportunity to use Yanagi-ryu. So I really got into this because now I had the whole thing, right? I had a bujutsu. We had sharp weapons. We had striking, throwing, breaking. We had, hojo jutsu. Anjay Sensei was a master of hojo jutsu.
Which is tying arts, yeah?
Which is really sophisticated stuff, and mostly lost. I think most of the people now that are touting it have watched his videos. Anjay Sensei was very, very detailed person, very, very much a perfectionist in what he did.
Was he exacting when he was teaching? Was he very strict in how you performed the technique?
Yes. He was not so much for all this accoutrement around all of that, but as far as the technique goes, we used to laugh. If Anjay Sensei walked past you and didn't say anything, we look at each other like, does this mean we're getting it right? I mean, I think for years, the highest compliment I would get every now and then, he'd look at me and goes, oh, looks like you've been practicing. No, he was very exacting like that. This is kind of a funny story. So years later, Brigade Trading Company, I was doing a sword cutting demonstration at the Blade Show West, which was in Orange County at the time.
At Brigade Trading Company, all things samurai, BUGEI.com. And that's where you can find swords and traditional tanto in the samurai tradition, as well as some other accessories. And it's it's still an active company, yes?
Yes. My son Christopher runs it now. The one that I'm with, Williams Blade Design. So I'm doing this cutting demonstration. I had three double mats up on the stand, and I double cut. I cut through them and cut all three of them again. So Toby Threadgill Sensei was standing next to Anjay Sensei, and he's going, hey, pretty good, huh? Pretty good. And he was goading him a little bit, right? Because Don had a hard time, right? Anjay Sensei had a hard time with that. So about 3 weeks later, we were teaching a seminar, and I went with Anjay Sensei to Dallas, Texas, and teaching at SMU. And we were out to lunch. Anjay Sensei said, that demonstration you did, a few weeks ago, at the Blade Show? I said, yes. He said, that was pretty good. And I'm like, excuse me? I made him say it twice. Right? Excuse me? Right? It was not one to give praise. People come from different eras, raised different ways. I don't teach like that because I don't think it's best for everybody. I teach with precision, of course.
Yes, I can tell that you'll exploit any opportunity that your students offer in terms of their technique. I can speak from experience.
Well, I look at this. This is very serious business on one hand. Now, depending upon who's coming to me, especially when I'm teaching out broadly, because I teach everything from personal defense and safety seminars, with civilians that don't too, as the highest level of special operations guys that we have. So depending upon who I'm teaching, how I'm going to be about it. You're a military guy. When you came around, we were doing stuff with that. That means that the consequences for failure are extreme. I buried a lot of guys in 1968. Okay. I was at a little post in Los Angeles, and we handled Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Ventura counties for initial notification of death and survivor assistance. There weren't very many of us, and that was Big Tet. I actually had that duty for 9 months. It's supposed to be 90 days. I was a presiding officer for 3 funerals in one day, where I'm handing flags and stuff to grieving spouses, parents, etc. And I can't even remember. I can't remember a lot of it. I have PTSD from it. People say, oh. And I go, listen.
I was going to say, that is some rough duty. And, just anybody who's not from that era can get a sense of what that's like from watching that movie, We Were Soldiers, with Mel Gibson.
Yeah, it's a great book. The movie, unfortunately, was, just so Hollywood. But that was a great book, and I talked to General Moore, and because he wrote in one of the chapters is about when he came back and he talked to survivors. I talked, this is 25, 30 years after I'd done all of this, and I was talking to him, and I said, General Moore, I really appreciate that chapter because I had to do that for a long period of time. And he goes, James, I could write that chapter, but I can't read it. When it comes to people serving and all of that, and this is not uncommon among people that have done certain things, I'll have tears well up my eyes very easily. It used to embarrass me, but now I look at it like, hey, that's for my fallen brothers. Those tears are just remembering what the cost is. People get upset about us like leaving Syria mostly or this or that. I go, what are we doing there? Can anybody define any of this over the last 18 years?
You can imagine how much sorrow and angst and fear you absorbed by doing those notifications and standing by those families as they grieved. I can only imagine what must be dwelling within.
You know, I got to tell you, true confessions. The thing I disliked the most by far was the initial notification of death. They'd call you early in the morning. You couldn't go to workplaces and stuff. You had to get them at home. I can't even say the whole thing without tearing up and choking up.
Yeah.
But I avoided the phone in the morning. And that's not to my credit. You know, I was a young officer, but I avoided that phone in the morning whenever I could. And that's not to my credit. It's just that was so difficult to do, you know, asking this person, are you Mrs. Jones?
And that's a lot about facing the truth of reality. I mean,
oh, God, is your son Private First Class George Jones serving the 101st Airborne, you know, and you're asking him these questions. And then tell them how bad the Secretary of the Army feels about the death of their kid. And I saw Stanley Resor 35 years later in Wyoming. We were having lunch with some friends, and I felt like walking over and saying, do you know how many people I had to tell how bad you felt about it, you know?
So Stanley Resor was the Secretary of the Army at the time?
Yeah, Secretary of Defense, I can't remember, but it was Stanley R. Resor. I'm pretty much sure of that. So anyway, and listen, in one sense, I'm not blaming, but the problem is way up the food chain, the decisions that get made and the distance from what's happening on the ground and the lack of viable strategy and the mistakes that get made for all kinds of reasons have a huge cost down the food chain to the people who serve.
Yeah, don't I know it?
Yeah, don't you know it? There's not enough responsibility taken. And I'm still involved in the sense that when guys that I've worked with go down, I will frequently be there at their funeral, etc., you know, and I see the same thing again. So when people ask me, well, Bob, I say, well, what are we doing there? You know, what are we doing there? Where's the strategy? Because I can see none. People used to ask me early on in this when I was doing other things, well, are we winning in Afghanistan? Well, could you define winning for me? Because I see no viable strategy there to accomplish a task that can be accomplished. So if you could explain to me what it is, maybe I could tell you, but I don't see anything like that. So not something we need to go down the road. It's just that knowing the costs means my responsibility is serious as it gets. I've got sons. I've got grandkids. When I'm teaching, you know, I was at one of those special places, and at one point we were doing a particular thing, and one of the guys goes, well, sir, I'm going to resist you. And I said, please do. You know, my outlook is, listen, if I can't make this work, I'm going to sit down and shut up. I don't want to be responsible for failure downrange. I know what the cost is. If I can't help them survive and teach them something that's going to be better to survive than what they're already doing, I'll sit down and shut up. I don't care how much money they're paying me. Hey, listen, I don't belong here if I can't make it better. So far, I've been able to make it better because the old ways are the best ways. People say, well, what about the street stuff? I said, what do you mean? There's no separation. I'm teaching stuff from a violent society where everybody carried weapons. People could be cut down in the middle of the street for bumping into a saya, right? They used all kinds of weapons and stuff. That's what I'm teaching. What do you mean? Street stuff. MMA as a sport. BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, basically Japanese Judo, grappling, newaza, katamewaza, is a sport. Some of these things are self-defense. You're blocking, you're fighting, you're going back and forth. Size, age, gender, you know, physical conditioning, all make a difference in those things, right? This is a very, very different. Everything we do, you know, that's why I designed my pens the way I do. They work really well. The key from CRKT, the pen from CRKT, flashlight, all those things are designed so to help people, you know, if they need it. And the fundamental thing of situational awareness is not getting yourself in situations that you can't get out of. Everybody, my boys I raised the same way. You can always get into deeper trouble than you can get out of. Your job is to recognize that and not go that way.
Friends, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Everyday Samurai and look forward to seeing you next time, particularly as we continue our conversation with William Sensei. Be sure and subscribe to our feed so you never miss an update. Get on our email list by visiting everydaysamurai.life and share the show with a friend. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. Help spread the word and build the community of warriors in service to liberty and the security of a free state. Links to where you can connect with William Sensei and his network of affiliated dojo teaching Nami, Aiki, Heiho are available at everydaysamurai.life/35. Remember, you can learn the language of your choosing the fun and easy way with a free trial to Rocket Languages at everydaysamurai.life. everydaysamurai.life/rocket. That's everydaysamurai.life/rocket. Until next time, stay sharp, stay aware, and be well.